tell you, I guess I travel quite a bit, and I think in the last 8 months, this is my fourth trip to India, so I get your lot, and it's wonderful. But the way I organize myself is I have a folder for each trip, or for each conference, occasion, whatever it is, and I open one at a time to see where I'm going next and what I'm presenting, and so it's not a surprise because I've prepared these, but nevertheless it's opening up to a new way of thinking. I also prepared these slides maybe 3 weeks ago, something like that. And I opened up the one that I'm presenting right now, and I realized that yesterday I was talking about abductive reasoning, and I'm going to talk about it again today as part of what I'm talking about. But I'll try to drill a little deeper and give you a concrete example as we go along. And this is from a paper called No Assemblage, or Assemblage in French, required, which was an article with Ron Sobin in 2019. And by assemblage, I'm talking about assemblage theory, which maybe you're familiar with. And it's object-oriented as well as the interaction between people and objects. But the way I'm using it, that there used to be, and I had to explain this in the article, you would get a toy for children, and on the box it would say no assemblage required. So it's a play on that concept. That is, people often get befuddled. Even with IKEA furniture, people get befuddled on how to actually put it together, and sometimes have to hire other people to do that for them. At any rate, if that's a mysterious title, really what I want to talk about is why you should create your own theory. You take someone else's theory and apply it, or at least try to do that in interpreting your results. So, consumer research is an applied discipline, both in the sense that it's used by companies, by organizations in order to develop their strategies and tactics, also in terms of borrowing theories and concepts from other disciplines. Depending upon the subdiscipline, it might be psychology, sociology, anthropology, neuroscience, semiotics, which we'll talk about tomorrow, and sometimes history, literary theory, organizational behavior, art, philosophy. So we take much and give back little in terms of original theories that we're creating in marketing. We're borrowing other people's or other disciplines' theories. And that's not necessarily bad, but I think we should try to create more original theories from our data. So interpret not necessarily with a particular theory in mind, but with multiple theories in mind, and the attempt to create new ones. And that involves abductive conceptual reasoning. So we might take a basic theory and refine it and extend it in some way, and that's potentially a contribution. But unfortunately, academic market researchers get caught up in sort of the theory of the month club. And so they create a theory that's popular, or they draw upon, they don't create a theory, and we often compound that flakiness and lack of originality with jargon and esoteric words and verbiage. Don't ever try to do that. Keep it simple, direct, communicate in terms that the audience will understand. Trying to sound sophisticated almost always fails. It looks like you're trying to hide under a cover of fancy words, polysyllabic words. But that doesn't hurt the fact that the emperor has no clothes. The emperor in this case has no theory, and consumer culture theory is not really theory at all. It's really consumer culture pursuing theory or using theory. It's really a chimera, which is a mythical animal, part lion, part goat, part serpent, that doesn't really exist. In other words, we don't really have a consumer culture theory. In fact, we don't have any consumer culture theory. We'd rather just borrow and perhaps extend other people's theories. At the other extreme, this was in 2008, Chris Anderson wrote an article in Wired magazine and said, to hell with theory. We don't need theory at all. All we need is algorithms that will show us predictive capabilities and allow us to target different consumers algorithmically, depending upon what they've searched for. That's good enough. We don't need to know why they did that. And the why part is the theory part. I would argue against that. We do need to understand why things happen. And that's the marriage between big data and little data, if you will, ethnographic research, which we're promoting in this class. So as Kenneth Bergen said, he's a psychologist, neither the facts nor the logic can furnish the questions to be asked. This is your research question of the data. Or the metaphor for conceptual organization. That's something that has to spring from you, the researcher. What are we trying to study here, and how do we interpret the findings that we're getting? We don't talk about results in qualitative research, we talk about findings. Results are a result of causal logic that A plus B equal X, or whatever it might be. Okay, so the problem is, over the last 30 years, interpretive consumer research has become less and less interpretive and more like deductive experimental research, with borrowing a theory ahead of actual data collection. That we're trying to do this in a way that practice theory or assemblage theory or whatever it might be, and you can see some other examples of the fads here that we've gone through, will help us understand. And I think you saw the monkey business illusion 2 days ago. When we're looking for one thing, we don't see the gorilla in the background or the players leaving or the curtain changing color. We're sort of blinded to other possibilities when we begin with the theory. And mea culpa, I have done this, and so I'm not saying I'm pure and innocent and it's all those other people out there that are wrong. But the problem is, off-the-shelf theory shortchanges our ability to contemplate generating original theory. So this is from a handbook of marketing theory by McLaren et al. And this is a quote, thus interpretive research stressed the emergent nature of research. This means that findings emerge. And I said last time that they really emerge from your mind rather than from the data per se. But also, research need not necessarily be directed towards the production of no authentic generalizations given the time and context-specific nature of interpretive research. In other words, if you have 20 people that you're dealing with and you're trying to understand a phenomenon, and I suggest that we begin with the phenomena we're trying to understand, you're not saying that these 20 people represent the world or represent West Bengal or represent India. We're just saying that's what we found with these 20 people, and these are who the 20 people are and how I chose them. And that may be a convenient sample. We learned something, and perhaps that's a truth that will generalize over every area. Maybe you've really found a theory that is going to have legs, be used in a lot of different places. But that's not a claim that we would make. We would say, here's what I found, these are the people, you judge whether it's applicable in another context, you being the audience who read this. And also remember that Arnold and Thompson, when they coined the term, or the brand name, consumer culture theory, didn't talk about theories. They talked about contexts that we were studying. And so this is, again, beginning with phenomena. And there are things that qualitative research can study that quantitative research really can't. And so I was talking to someone just after the break, or coming in early from the break, about financial well-being, and he's in finance, and if you're talking about financial knowledge, that's pretty concrete, and you can see whether someone does or does not have understanding of certain financial concepts. But financial well-being, if you talk to a 50-year-old man versus a 20-year-old woman, a rich person versus a poor person, they're going to have different ideas about financial well-being. And so this is a subjective concept. It's a phenomena that you could try to understand by doing qualitative research. Current distinctions that what's called theory-enabled research is, these are examples of something similar, theory-unfolded research, some published papers based on Bourdieu and consumer cultural capital. But emergent research, on the other hand, is not the same as grounded theory, again, because theory doesn't emerge from the data. It must be consistent with the data, but it comes from your mind. And so Timmermans and Tavery are among those recommending abductive analysis. Analysis is the word I was trying to say. And they talk about revisiting a problem that has been studied before, but maybe needs to be restudied, re-examined more openly, rather than just applying an existing theory. Defamiliarizing. Going to a place or people that you don't understand well, or putting aside your prior understandings of how something works. And trying to approach it with alternative potential solutions, potential understandings in mind. So we want to ask, what is this phenomenon a case of? Not deductive or inductive thinking, but trying to step back from the data once again and get a big picture. Look for surprises, anomalies, new experience, and solve puzzles in the data. And I'll give you a concrete example with something called the logobi, or the dance of the logos. And I've mentioned this before. Well, first of all, we don't need to go through the a priori theory of the monkey business, because it's, again, something that you've seen a couple of days ago. Because if you're too focused on the theoretical focus, you're not, the prior theoretical focus going in, you're not going to be able to generate an original insight. Let me give you another example of that. This is a story about Sherlock Holmes and his faithful sidekick, Dr. Watson. They go on a camping trip, and after dinner and a bottle of wine, they lay down at night and go to sleep. Some hours later, Holmes awakes and nudges his faithful friend. Watson, look up at the sky and tell me what you see. Watson replied, I see millions of stars. And what does that tell you? Watson pondered for a minute and said, astronomically, it tells me that there are millions of galaxies and potentially billions of planets. Astrologically, I observe that Saturn is in Leo. Horologically, I deduce that the time is approximately 3:15. Theologically, I can see that God is all-powerful and that we are small and insignificant. Meteorologically, I expect we will have a beautiful day tomorrow. What does it tell you, Holmes? Holmes was silent for a minute and then spoke. Watson, you idiot, someone has stolen our tent. So, the fine, detailed, a priori explanations that Holmes comes up with, this is the big picture of why can you see the stars at all? Because our tent is gone. So sometimes we fail to see the forest for the trees, but we may also even fail to see the trees when we have an a priori key to the universe. So I would argue that theory-enabled, or we argue in this paper, theory-enabled research is more often theory-constrained or theory-disabled research. And again, McLaren and some other people call for research which does not begin with the theory to be tested, but rather with the phenomenon to be understood. And that's what I would argue that we should do as well. So the mental shift required is to move from seeing ethnography as a validating science, trying to prove that something is understandable with a particular a priori theory, to a discovery science. That with that in mind, we can see a number of experiences and insights that could be embryo theories in waiting. And this is Ann Jordan saying that. And I'll come up with some. But first I want to come back to the example of the logobi, the dance of the logos. This is something to be understood. And I've mentioned this, it comes from Côte d'Ivoire, Ivory Coast in Africa. And this is by Sacha Newell, an anthropologist. And this is a book that he published. And this is, I don't want to call them a gang, but this is a group of young petty thieves. And I was mentioning that they'll do something like steal someone's smartphone and sell it to someone else, and then dress as police people and come back and confiscate it and do it all over again. And this is a folded over picture. There's really only 3 people here rather than 5. But these are a couple of the people, and the clothes that they have on are low-end brand name clothes. So they might be wearing Adidas sneakers and polo shirts. I think in fact this is a polo shirt. And in that case, they know the real thing. There are a number of counterfeits available, but they're buying the real thing. They're connoisseurs in that sense. And what happened is that they're doing this bluff. I was talking about how they were at this outdoor bar one night with their phones on the table and all the bottles of beer they consumed, flashing their rolls of cash. They were impressing these women that were at the table. At any rate, this is the description by Sasha Newell of what's going on. He says they're celebrating a successful forgery scam by wasting the table, spending their earnings extravagantly on beer, food, and flashing their roll of cash. The women are dressed in African wax print material cut in body-hugging European fashion, while the men wore U.S. and European brand name clothing, Nike, Adidas, Fashion Nobel, Fubu, Docksiders, Hilfiger. Almost everyone had a cell phone displayed prominently. The rolls of money being flashed and spent, the prominently labeled clothes, the expensive drinks and cell phones were all part of an elaborate performance of success and modern citizenship that was disconnected from the economic reality of the performers. While to all appearances the crowd was living the good life, many of those present that night would struggle to find enough money to feed themselves the next day. And so the question is, why would they do that? And this is not just in Ivory Coast. Similar things have been found in other African countries as well as Brazil and Vietnam. And so it's not necessarily isolated to just Ivory Coast. So what you see here is a more upscale version of the logo. This one is actually in the Congo, Democratic Republic of the Congo. And they call themselves Sepours, but they go to Paris to buy their clothes, which is a major part of their budget. And I'll show you a clip of them in just a moment. Well, actually, it's down at the bottom here. So let's have a look at this, I think. Oh, I'm sorry, you're not hearing that. So it's actually it's actually again a spear ad, but and this was in the Congo. But similar things are happening here, and they're strutting their stuff. They're showing off, they're flexing, and they're trying to do this in a competitive way. So one person gets up and basically says, "Oh yeah, you're nothing. Watch my clothes and watch my dance moves." And so it's competitive. They're putting the other people down. Something like this is done in black communities in the U.S. called the Dozens, and they ritually insult each other. They say like, your mother is so ugly that blah, blah, blah. And then the other person comes back and says, oh yeah, well your mother is so ugly, blah, blah. And they're ritually insulting themselves, so they build a thick skin. So when others in the society attack them verbally or even physically, they don't fight back. They're building that resistance and also the verbal skill. This is sort of where rap came from, in trying to have a competitive rap context and effect. But in this case, showing off their clothes and putting down the others. And they call themselves bluffers. They know that, in fact, they're bluffing. So, let me get back here. So what's going on here? I mentioned before that one possible explanation is binging, and Rick Roque is the guy associated with that. Maybe they're blowing windfall income. If you win the lottery, you're not supposed to spend the money on groceries or invest it for your future retirement. You're supposed to buy yourself something, a luxury good, perhaps. And that's why gambling casinos often have luxury good stores as a part of the apparatus. Or it could be pecuniary emulation of Thorsten Veblen concept. They're trying to imitate higher class people. Or it's just impression management. They're just trying to look good and win the favor of women. Maybe they're spending their economic capital to solidify their social capital. In other words, by sharing the money among the people there, they're building a tighter network among their friends and among those in their local circle. Or maybe it's local culture losing out to global commodification. It happens various places in the world. Maybe it's just giving in to immediate gratification. Hey, let's have a good time, eat, drink, and be merry. Tomorrow you may die. You don't know what's going to happen. Maybe it's compensatory consumption in recompense to block social mobility. In other words, they can't go any higher. They don't have the education, they don't have the opportunities, and so why not spend the money here and now? And that relates maybe immediate gratification as well. Maybe it's sexual signaling to attract mates. Maybe it's sharing to diffuse envy and reinforce a moral economy of mates. Because I have all this money, you shouldn't envy me because I'm sharing it with you. And so it's diffusing that envy. Or maybe it's splurging to avoid the moral economy of the extended family. If they bring the money home, they've got to spend it on the family rather than themselves. Or maybe it's just a status-seeking potlatch. In Native American West Coast, Northwest Coast, there was a potlatch tradition that the colonials sort of prohibited for a while, but it's come back, where you actually give away things, or you even destroy them. You throw them off a cliff. And that included their slaves that they threw off the cliff in some instances. Maybe it's a modern version of that. Maybe it's impulsive, irrational behavior. These are all potential explanations, and you should try, rather than hone in on a single interpretation, to see about alternatives. This is sort of the brainstorming that we were talking about before. So this is sort of like, I think this is in detail, the blind man and the elephant. He's feeling different parts and describing the elephant as being like a tree if they have a leg, or like a rope if they have a tail, and so forth. Or there's a scene in Hamlet where Hamlet is suggesting shapes in the clouds to Polonius. I think I see a camel, and Polonius agrees. He says, oh no, I think it's a whale. And so he's suggesting to Polonius, who's a sort of braggart father figure, and getting him to believe. We can see different shapes in the clouds and interpret them differently. So how did Newell interpret this? He said that these are bluffers, it's a smoke screen of illusory wealth, and I've mentioned before, they dress as the spirits of the ancestors or the spirits of the forest, and the crowd says this, they believe that this is the real thing, even though they know that this is their brother, cousin, or uncle, and so forth. And here too, at the table that night, the people that are there know that these people really aren't rich, really aren't able to spend freely like this all the time, but it's an open secret. They don't call them out for it. So the mask wearer actually becomes the spirit of mask, the spirit of possession. if you're worn a mask, you know that it can transform you, or even with cosmetics and so forth, it can transform it. So rather than passing, bluffing is a legitimate display of cultural symbols of modern identity. This is Newell once again. They have the connoisseurship, taste, and knowledge to be modern. They lack only the money. So the mask is an authentic, if wishful, anticipatory self. Now, remember we had all of those possible interpretations. How do you choose among them? These are some different criteria that you might use. Are you going to talk about the macro, meso, or micro level, individual, group, or society, gender, age, or class? What do you prefer as a focus? Or modify existing theory, or Occam's razor, choose the simplest one, or you synthesize these rather than go with one. I said before that Niels Bohr, in a quote, said that the opposite of a trivial truth is clearly false, but the opposite of a great truth is also true. And so maybe you're trying to find the greater truth. Maybe you just do a careful consideration of the fit with the data, and you choose which of these theories fits best. Or the usefulness and potential for understanding other phenomena. For Newell's particular theory of the Lagobis, it is found in other contexts. We looked at Africa, Vietnam, and Brazil. But there's also an American Lagobi, I would argue. This is a scene from a movie version of a book called American Psycho by Bret Easton Ellis. And let me just see if I can bring this up, if I can find the mouse. I found it, but it went away. Oh, come on mouse. There it is. Okay, so let's see if we can see this. So that's the same sort of status competition that we saw in the advance of the logos, but in this case in a corporate context.
Design rarely takes the spotlight in cinema, let alone stationary design. But in American Psycho...
So that was an analysis of the movie, we won't go there. So in choosing among those other accounts, we need to apply criteria like this. There's some other phenomena that sort of flesh out this application of masks and bluffing. Our avatars are sort of representations of us. Right now we just drive avatars with a mouse, but in the metaverse we actually are the avatars, and we assume that our facial expressions are replicated on this three-dimensional being, and also our hand movements and arm movements are as well. But there's some work on something called the Proteus effect. Proteus was a Greek god that could assume different sorts of shapes. And so avatars in black robes, those that are assigned avatars in black robes, have them commit more antisocial acts, black being a negative color, at least in the West. In World of Warcraft, those with attractive avatars are more successful. Those with attractive avatars are also more intimate and seductive. Those with child avatars react more quickly and have a childlike worldview. Those with taller avatars are more confident. And this carries over offline as well. So that those who are given an older avatar become more concerned with saving. Those who have a more physically fit avatar, and these are assigned to them, it makes people exercise more. Now this is experimental research, and so you've been assigned an avatar in a black robe. It may or may not be an actual phenomenon when you choose your own avatar, or design your own avatar. Goffman and impression management is relevant here, but they say masks hide the real self, that we're hiding behind a mask. On the other hand, Goffman said we are the combination of all the masks that we wear, and so it's not that we're hiding the true self. This is just a part of ourself. When we put on this mask, that's a version of ourself, and we have other versions that also are part of who we are. Okay, so how do we get from concepts to theories, and how do we get concepts in the first place? a concept represents something usually at an abstract or metaphoric level. So we talk about brand loyalty. The notion of loyalty, where did it come from originally? What were we loyal to? Sorry?
Buying it again and again.
Binding?
To buy that product again and again.
Well, that's what loyalty is in this context. But loyalty wasn't originally applied to brands. What else would we be loyal to before brands existed?
Masters, country.
To our country, to our nation, state, whatever it might be, or to our friends.
Culture.
Yeah.
Culture, yeah.
Yeah. And so all of these are possibilities, but we borrowed it and put it in the context of brand. So a theory provides an understanding of some phenomenon with a small set of concepts. And Susan Fournier, in a famous study, said that consumers relate to a brand like a person. And so they can be casual friends, romantic flings, marriage partners, and so forth. This was a study that I mentioned, dissertation that was based on 3 people, 2 of whom were relatives, but nevertheless a very important conceptual finding that applied to a lot of areas, and Susan Fournier's career was sort of based on this and further extensions. So a theory orders concepts in a way that produce interesting insights. Theories are defined as explanations, the answers to why something happens, as opposed to descriptions. So it's a system for ordering concepts in a way that produces understandings or insights. Old book on marketing theory by Zaltman et al. This is just interesting because some people put tattoos of brands on their bodies, and that's just about as loyal as you can be. Unfortunately, some of these brands have gone out of existence or changed their logos, and so Apple no longer has the rainbow flag in its Apple any longer, but going back to old versions, you can see that it did. So what is original consumer theory? It's based on primary data. It's emergent, but remember it's emerging from you. It's only consistent with the data. So examples are brand relationships in Fournier that we just looked at, and brand community that Muniz and O'Gwyn talk about. They've talked about the Saab automobile community and the Apple Macintosh community, and others where there's a strong sense of loyalty and a group of people that share that loyalty, either in person, basically neighborhoods and people next to each other, or online. So we have brand communities online as well. But it can also be based on secondary data and other studies, yours or other people, and new conceptualizations. So conceptual contributions are something that Debbie McInnes and Majid Yadav have promoted, and we did a special issue of a journal on marketing theory devoted to it. Experiential consumption perhaps could be an original theory that's developed by Holbrook and Hirschman, and extended self that I did years ago had some legs, I think, as well. Now, this was I'm not going to spend much time on this, but there was a study in 2015 of consumer research at 40 years old, and they simply did a cluster analysis based on words in the article, and these were the clusters that they came up with. So it wasn't an a priori definition of any of these. These weren't a priori category, but they put a label on each of the clusters that they found with different words that go together. So for example, these were the words that were taken to define consumer culture. Materialism, possession, gift, culture, identity, experience, and so forth. And you can see this red column is the number of citations that this cluster of articles have had, and it's greater than the others, which means that in terms of generating interesting material, qualitative research does relatively better than these other sort of concepts. These were the articles that, these were, I think, the top 12 cited articles. And you can see that the red things here are their theory articles. The blue things are meta theories, looking at all the articles in that category and trying to get a meta theory of what they're all about. And the others are all theory plus data, the data we're generating, rather than just conceptual approaches. So arguably all of these heavily cited articles were consumer culture theory articles in some way, because this is a journal about consumers. So in conclusion to this part, I want to go on and talk about stories. Let's see if we get that. We need criteria to sort possible theoretical frameworks. And the two categories that we argue in this paper are important are the fit with the data. You've got to be able to argue for it and decide why Woke's binging was not enough and Newell becoming the mask was more important, plus Goffman's insights on masks. So fit with the data and usefulness, that Newell's masks and digital avatar, Proteus effects, and the modern American, Legovian American psycho are all potential examples of application in other areas. And I haven't really discussed where ideas come from, but that's another topic for another day, and we'll talk about it a little bit tomorrow. But read, observe, travel broadly. Bill Wells suggested that discovery as a key principle, we need to leave home, our geographic home, our disciplinary home, our social home. But discovery is still not abductive. It's suggesting that we're finding something that is there. And it's not just that we're finding it. We're applying our original insights, our original concepts as well. This says final conclusions, but it's not. I want to go on and talk about the stories, please.
Yeah. See, thank you for today's session. It was there were so many queries and like how to connect this kind of. We understood, but still there is a very silly question. So
no silly questions.
Yeah. So the thing is, it can be a kind of situation we are confused, sometimes related to the connecting towards a theory. Suppose like a condition we are finding a kind of context where we can find there is a consumer culture theory or consumer, it may be how the people react. There are so many consumer culture theory related things, but there is also a kind of scope of literary theory like the colonization theory or counter-colonization theory. So there may be a kind of confusion state how to mix or how to connect the all the theories, like theories from the consumer or the social science domain and on the literary theory. How to blend this kind of, this is a dilemma.
Well, and that's really the fun part. This is the creative part of how to make sense of things with existing theories or ideally with a theory of your own. With abductive reasoning, you're trying to stand back and say, what might this be a case of? You're trying to use brainstorming to look at multiple possibilities. You're trying to find puzzles and anomalies in the data or contradictions, two different things from two different sets of people. And you're trying to understand that. And so you pose a problem to yourself. Here's a problem, here's a dilemma, how do we resolve this? And there are many problems and dilemmas in the world, but we're looking for it in our set of data in the particular context and particular phenomena that we're studying. And abductive reasoning has some suggestions of almost states of mind that we might bring to this. Alternative casing, looking at it from a different metaphorical point of view, and so forth. So there are techniques to help in doing that, but the fun part is we are confused, and we're trying to bring some understanding, the understanding that helps best understand the phenomena in light of our data is the problem. And these are some tools that will help you do that, but it's not like you go bing, bang, boom, and there's the answer. Because you are trying to step back and imagine, to defamiliarize yourself with the way you think you understand this. You're mostly Bengalis, and Durgapur is something that you've been through and are a part of. But what is it really all about? Why these pandals and avans and other portions of what constitute Durga Puja? And people come back for it and so forth. So what is that all about? Why? What is this festival? Is it just a puja, or is there more to it than that? It's an interesting context or phenomena to study, a phenomena that I think you all know. But how do you interpret what that is at an abstract level? You know, at a concrete level, what's involved. And you participated, participatory observation. But how do you apply an abstract understanding of what's going on here? And is this similar to Diwali, or is this entirely different? Contrasting different phenomena may bring some insights as well. How do you structure various festivals during the year? At any rate, there are various approaches. I can't answer that with, follow these 3 steps and you'll get there. Rather sort of loosen yourself up, use these criteria, try to find possible anomalies, and draw on your broad experience. Travel to other parts of India and see what festivals are like in Chennai, and how is that different. And trying to understand it by contrast, comparisons, defamiliarizing it, and so forth. So some suggestions rather than a recipe. Yeah.
So, while going through a similar paper in Academy of Management Journal, which generally deals with the conceptual frameworks, so they were talking about that when 2 theories we are combining many a times and trying to build up a third theory, maybe it is not too much coherent or in consonance with the original theories. But for the publication purpose or for research, higher impact journals, it works substantially.
Good.
So, what should be the order of the day? How should we combine so that they are intertwined and not out of the place?
Why are you trying to combine 2 theories? Is it because they really work in this context, or is there some other reason? Did the reviewers suggest this?
I will give an example from HR and OP domain. For example, conservation of resource theory and social exchange theory. We are combining to build up a theory in marketing which is interdisciplinary in nature, right? So, does it work in that way? Sometimes it goes out of the place.
Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. These 2 theories may match up well and together give you new insight that either would independently give you, but it's not necessarily the case. They have to be, you have to find the link between them that makes them sync up, if that makes sense. If you're just saying that this theory tells you about this part of the phenomena and this theory tells you about another part of the phenomena, that's not really integrating them. And so you're trying to integrate them to create a third thing. I think that's what you said initially, and that's great. If they work in that way, and if you get new insights by combining them, great. I think that's elegant. That's a good solution.
What should be the principle of conglomerating those theories?
Synergy. If you have a research partner, or if you have a partner in life, and the 2 of you together are able to do something neither of you can do individually, that's a good sync and good matchup. And the same with the theories. If you're able to do things with these 2 theories together that you can't do with either one by themselves, that would be a key to success. Ultimately, for the journal, you've got to argue why this is valuable, what you've contributed. And so that's really explicating why you put them together and how they work together. Yeah?
So when we are interpreting something, we come up with different interpretations for the same thing.
Sure.
When we did an exercise also, we had different perceptions and interpretations. So when we are, like suppose doing a study and we have multiple interpretations, so should we use different interpretations in a single research, or we have to stick to just one way of explaining or interpreting?
You can have multiple ones, but I wouldn't have a different theory for each person that you talk to. For example, you'd like to have at least some support from multiple people. But the fact that different people in your group or brainstorming within your group, you come up with a couple of explanations that seem to both apply is great, even if they contradict each other. Remember, the opposite of a great truth is also truth. So it's possible that you're looking at different levels of So I don't think there's anything wrong with that, as long as you don't have too many theories that you're trying to apply.
Picking up from her question, so there might be multiple interpretations. So how do we make sure that our interpretation is rigorous and watertight, so that there are no loopholes or people don't poke holes in that? How do we make it more rigorous?
Well, I would try it out with another academic first. You can get a friendly review and tell them, listen, what's really useful to me at this point is to be as critical as you can. Find the holes in this. And that's sort of like pre-testing a product or service, that in this case you're pre-testing the explanation. And once you submit it to the journal, the reviewers are going to try to poke holes as much as they can, or say, oh yeah, what about this theory? Why did you not consider that? Or why don't you gather more data to shore up your argument? So the reviewers will, in poking holes, you think you've done the interpretation, you've written up the paper, and boom, that's it. No, the reviewers want to be interpreters as well, and they may try to reinterpret your data. And then you have to either examine what they're looking at and say, yes, you're right, that is a better explanation, or argue why yours is better, or say that in this case we combine both of those and we get some additional insights, there's some synergy in applying both of these together. Yeah.
Sir, my question is also similar to theirs. Is this the way how you maintain the reliability or report the reliability issue in terms of qualitative research?
Well, again, we don't say reliability and validity in qualitative research. We talk more about trustworthiness. And what we're talking about in that case is, are these good data? Did you go deep enough? Did you have time enough? If these are based on 10-minute interviews, that's, the reviewers are going to try to poke holes and say, that's not enough. You can't have gone very deep if you only talk to people for 10 minutes. But if you're talking about the integrity of the theory, is this really a good interpretation or not? Again, I would consider alternative explanations and see for each of them whether those are in fact better than the one that you tentatively suggested applies to this criteria. So, in other words, sort of anticipate what the reviewers might do in trying to say, oh yeah, well, what about this one? Or there's a problem here. So pre-test by running this by a colleague, another academic, but also try yourself to consider other alternatives and argue to yourself or in the paper why this one is better. And you could say, we tried A, B, and C, but it turns out that D is a better explanation, and here's why. And you can actually lay that out in the paper. And it shows that you're shortchanging the reviewers to impose another theory, because you're saying, I did consider that, but I threw it away. We prefer this one. We think it's a better theory, more trustworthy, has greater applicability and usefulness, but it's also more consistent with the data. And you can say, here's what person A said, this is what an ethnography said, this is what an autoethnography said, and so forth. So multiple sources of data can help back that up as well. Yes?
You have already, clarified this. However, for my understanding, I would like to ask this question.
Sure.
The difference between, the specific difference between what is theory, what is not theory, and how it is related to concepts, frameworks, something else like the conceptual frameworks and all. Because I have gone through a couple of papers where it is written attitude theory. How come attitude be considered as theory? So I'm a bit confused.
Well, attitudes are a concept. And they're an imaginary concept because we can't pull out and measure your attitudes. We can have scales, but they may or may not reflect your attitudes. And if we ask people, what is your attitude about X, Y? In fact, there was a study that surveyed people and asked, what do you think about the Metallic Metals Act? And the majority of people said it's a good thing. Some people said it's a bad thing. A few people said they were uncertain, but that was a minor group of people. Problem is, there is no Metallic Metals Act, and so if people ask about their attitude, have one, but they didn't understand the concept. And so you've got to have good data to assure that people really have an attitude rather than just responding to questions as if they had an attitude. At any rate, attitudes are concepts, and you need to link those up with values or with something bigger, identity, something of that sort, and of course the brand or the product or the service that you're focusing on. Usually qualitative researchers don't talk about attitude theory, and so it's a little bit difficult to suggest what it might link up to, but it has to, that concept has to, that's descriptive. You say, this group has attitude A and this group has attitude B. Okay, that's fine, but why? And what does that, how does that matter? Basically, the explanation you're trying for is answering the why question rather than the what question. The what question is descriptive, the why question is more interpretive. And it's not immediately apparent. You've got to work with the data, you've got to, in a group context, brainstorm and generate other possible interpretations, and throw out successively in a row those that don't work as well as your interpretation. But the interpretation is really the why question, answer to the why question.
Can we call ALM model as theory? Can we consider that?
You can call it a model, you can call it a theory. Usually we try to avoid boxes and arrows in qualitative interpretation because that's linear causality that says A causes B, and that's the positivist way of understanding the world. We have a more holistic way, and we try to avoid box and arrow representations of our theory. We can't always do that. Sometimes it winds up looking. Do you know what an ouroboros is? It's like a snake that's eating its tail in a circle. You've probably seen this. We use that as an explanation of sort of the process of innovation and fascination. There's big hype, and then it goes down to dissatisfaction, and then something new comes up. So that's a conceptual way of representing without boxes and arrows, how the new replaces the old and the hype cycle that's going to begin. Just an example that is using a non-box and arrow way of representing.
So that means you are like suggesting like there may be so many theories you have, but we are supposed to narrow down as much as possible and come to a concrete like theoretical frame which can explain the phenomena in a better way.
Not only that, it may be able to explain other phenomena as well, ideally. And it may, in some cases, be two theories that you wind up with. Depends on the phenomena that you're looking at. Yeah.
You talked about synergy. So synergy is like very important. But suppose there are theories that exist in a separate domain. For example, in one domain, a theory is called belief perseverance, and in another domain it is called as confirmation bias, for example. So, and both holds the same belief. So, combining those two theories would bring a more stronger synergy. How do we interpret that? Is it not the old wine in new water?
Maybe it is, but you're combining, and you're right, the synergy is what you're really looking for. Do these theories work together? Do they generate new insights when you apply both of them? And so, confirmation bias is a theory, but it may or may not work with the other theory that you're applying, and you just need to test with your data and see if it works and gives new insights. But before you do that, before you grab onto these two theories, consider other possibilities and try to generate, using abductive logic, new possibilities besides these two. Even though they seem to fit offhand, they may or may not wind up being the best. They may, that's fine. But if you consider other possibilities as well, then you're able to strengthen your argument for your theory, your combination of those theories.
So making a theory really stand out or strong enough, so there should be a underlying construct that holds for that theory.
Yeah, I mean, what you're ideally going to have is that aha, voila moment when everything clicks and it occurs to you. And that may not be while you're studying the data, it may be while you're watching something that's on your phone or doing something else or eating a meal. Or early in the morning when I'm just waking up, I tend to have ideas, or I wake up in the night with ideas. So I keep a pad and pencil by my bed so I can remember them. Otherwise, they'll be lost in the morning. But wherever you have the ideas, you're looking for something that is, it's not good enough, it's great. It really fits the data, and you say, wow, this is, why did I miss that? This is beautiful. This is something that really helps me understand. So you have those moments, I hope. So in final conclusion for this part, and we've still got the time, I think, to go into another part of how do you present these ideas. Be prepared in the wee hours, that's what I was just talking about. Use your intuition, both primary and secondary process thinking. Those together are what Ben Hirschman in an article calls the conceptual theorist. And at any rate, you're trying to, first of all, use the right brain, free thinking, playful sort of thinking to get these ideas, and then the left brain logical presentation mode in writing up the article. Patty Sunderland talked about explicit theorizing is a currency. In other words, if you have a CV that has a series of articles that you've published that are theoretical, that gives you some credibility, and that's currency that helps you progress and get promoted and so forth. We have the advantage of being consumers and studying consumers. So our self-insights, our self-questions of who am I, are probably the source of a lot of our research proposals. And so that's one way, it's a good way, because we all think about what we're doing, and we're human, we're consumers, and so forth. And we're capable also of generating our own theoretical insights. And we need to do what Ostergaard and Linux called daring theoretical leaps, not leaps of faith, but leaps of interpretation. We really go, this sounds outlandish, but hey, it works. That's the sort of feeling that we're trying for to hatch our embryo theories in waiting and Jordan's term. So I argued earlier that all research write-up is telling stories, even experiments and models and so forth. We're telling a story about our data. Looking back at articles that I've written, had 4 explicit stories, and they're for different purposes. One was a study with Janine Costa. We called it the Mountain Man Myth, reenactments of the 1825 to 1840 rendezvous. This was fur trappers trapping beaver in North America, America and Canada. Then they would come to this rendezvous once a year, and they would sell their beaver pelts to someone who was making top hats in France and the U.S. And they would also, this was meeting all of their friends after a year away. They drank a lot, they caroused, and there weren't many women there. There were some Native Americans, or we call them First Nations people. At any rate, this was a Journal of Consumer Research article back in 1998. But the story that we were telling, the rendezvous typically occupies picturesque meadows called parks, interspersed with and surrounded by pines and firs. Mountains rise nearby, a stream flows through most sites. White tents and teepees, some painted with Indian designs, dot the parks and the edges of the adjacent forest. Cars and other modern things are kept out of this. You're not supposed to have anything that would not have existed in the period 1825 to 1840. In the morning, the smell of burning wood mixes with evergreen scents and the earthy smell of damp ground slowly heated by the morning sun. And there's a beginning, middle, and end to most stories, although not necessarily in that order, but this one is. As the buckskinners, and that's what they call themselves because they're wearing deer hide clothing, arise generally an hour or two after sunrise, they begin preparations for the morning meal. The aromas of sizzling grease, you wouldn't like this in India, and percolating coffee fill the air. Early risers begin to call out one another, stopping for a chat and a cup of coffee. In these high altitude camps, the morning temperature is crisp, sometimes below freezing. The sound of crackling fires is soon complemented by the sharp retorts of black powder rifles in the nearby shooting range. And acrid black powder smoke begins to waft across the campsites. As the day proceeds, many gravitate to the hustle and bustle of Traders' Row, where exuberant greetings of acquaintances from years past are often heard. In the early evening, smoke rises from the campfires, contributing to a nostalgic ambiance and a sense of disjuncture with the modern world that lies somewhere beyond the rendezvous sites. Shortly before sunset, in a remote, pristine mountain meadow, we sit amidst several hundred other buckskin-clad men, women, and children, in a council meeting forming a circle perhaps 100 feet in diameter. A few horses neigh in the distant horse camp, and hundreds of white canvas teepees and tents can be seen tucked away in the pines. In the center of our human circle, a huge log bonfire has begun to blaze. People talk casually until the bushway, a large man in bushy gray beard, announces that a ceremony is about to take place. He appears to be seated in our midst, and 2 men and 2 women, all white and in their 40s, standing solemnly before the bonfire. They wear elaborate Plains Indian clothing. Pony Rider explains that 2 smokes will perform a pipe ceremony to open and bless the rendezvous. They begin to dance slowly around the circle as one of the women rhythmically beats a rawhide drum. 2 smokes carry a long, beaded pipestone ceremonial pipe, and one of the women carries a buffalo skull with sage in its eye sockets and its mouth stuffed with sage. Their prayers bless our 4-legged brothers, each of the 7 directions, the cardinal directions, plus zenith, nadir, and what is that word? The messenger. The bourgeois who the bourgeois who have sacrificed so that we can be here, Grandmother Earth and Wanatanka, our grandfather. Besides the pipe ceremony, there is a sacrificial burning of sage, a small giveaway, an honor dance, and the last of these rituals brings the ceremony to a close with all of us slowly dancing counterclockwise in a circle. At the last drum beat, there's a cacophony of whoops and shouts. The Western rendezvous has begun. So this is a story to sort of set the scene and tell the story. We're not used to seeing things like this in write-ups, but the intent here is to create a mood to try to convey something of the activity. Actually, there's one more part to this of the end. We haven't gotten there yet. Evening is a time for social activities. Following the group council fire, individual campsites may become centers of noise, action, and entertainment. Sounds of musical instruments and singing interspersed with loud bursts of laughter can be heard throughout the camp. These homemade amusements often continue into the early morning hours. On such nights, far from the city, myriad stars and at some sites the northern lights fill the sky. One set of values sought in the rendezvous setting is escape from rules, contraptions, and stresses of daily life. The rational order of normal bureaucratic and corporate experience is transcended, even though the original mountain men sometimes worked for fur companies. The most revered mountain man type is the individual free trapper. Laughter rings at these rendezvous as it did at the original. Work is pervasively cited as a dirty 4-letter word, and even mountain men who are dedicated teachers give at least lip service to this anti-work philosophy. And finally, wristwatches are not a period accessory, and virtually everyone awakens and retires with little care or idea about the time. Inevitably, we found ourselves driving away from the rendezvous we had attended at an overly slow 10 or 20 miles an hour until we encountered traffic and began to shift our pace back to that of our normally fast-paced lives. Those who spend their entire summer going to rendezvous like two feathers in white dove, white male and white female, both age 40, who teach elementary school in Montana, say it's hard to get back up to speed when school starts in the fall. So again, this is setting the stage. We're doing participant observation. We've made buckskin clothing for ourselves. Janine Costa, the co-researcher, brought her son along, and unlike us, he actually shot rifles at the rifle range, so he gathered some data for us as well. So that's one type of story that is telling. There's no theoretical explanation here. This is just telling the story of what happened. So this part of it is descriptive, and then we go on to interpret what all the stories, what is going on here. Yeah.
Art of writing is also a kind of core of qualitative research that we can see here.
Yeah, you're right.
The storytelling has to be so engaging, like whatever you can find out here.
Yeah, a story well told is appreciated by the reviewers rather than, why are you telling me this trash? This doesn't make sense. This is not a theory. We get to the theory later in the article. Okay, here's a second example. And this was at the time that the former Soviet Union collapsed, communism collapsed in Europe, and among other people, Francis Fukuyama said this is the end of history. So this article was called Hyperreality and Globalization, Culture in the Age of Ronald McDonald. And this is a more fanciful sort of article, an exaggerated interpretation of what could be in the future. Archaeologist Gucci Toyota Rolex, a recent graduate of Ralph Lauren University, of Karl Marx University, there was such a place in Budapest, sits in his IBM Sensatorium seeking clues that will help him understand the obscure origins of the major world holiday. He believes that some of these holidays, including Coke Day, Elvis Day, St. Johnny Walker Day, the Day of the Levi's, Sony Fieldman Day, and the Feast of the 7-Eleven, may have originated almost a millennium ago in the 20th or 21st century, but the evidence is far from clear. So this was 1996. No major catastrophe or war has obliterated relevant data. In fact, the period since the likely origin of these holidays is now known as the Fox-McDonald, after McDonald's first entered what were then known as China, the Soviet Union, and Eastern Europe. This signaled the peaceful global conquest by St. Ronald McDonald at a time when McDonald's sold only food products and the people of the earth spoke a variety of languages. No, the lack of data is instead because at some point after the development of the United World Government and Entertainment Incorporated, history simply lacked any tension to make it interesting. There was also convincing evidence that history was a source of discontent and neuroses. So when people learned to stop recording the trivia of daily and yearly events, history stopped as well. As a result, even the details of St. Ronald's birth and life are lost in the mists of antiquity, along with the biographies of lesser deities such as Colonel Sanders, the Michelin Man, and Mickey Mouse. Although he accepts the catechism that history is bunk, Gucci hopes that if the roots of current celebrations and their patron saints can be pieced together, this proof of divine inspiration will help stop the strange sociopathology spreading among a growing number of people of the earth, heretic asceticism. Not only does this barbaric and nihilistic cult refuse to worship St. Ronald, they also reject all of our major holidays and refuse to consume the associated products to which they are constitutionally entitled. Recently, they've also begun to boycott such sacred sites as Marlboro Country, Ford Country, Sesame Street, Disney Universe, and even McDonald's Land. What is worse, they fail to show any enthusiasm for the games, even when such arch rivals as Nissan and Toyota contest. Obviously, such asceticism is dangerous and threatens not only the economy, but our essential values. Gucci has no desire to kindle nostalgia for a long dead past, but by returning to the origins of these world holidays, Perhaps the non-believers can be made to accept the legends celebrated by these holidays, and their sacrilegious, apathetic behavior can be stopped before it spreads further. So this was intended to be far-fetched and farcical, but it was looking at, what sort of change could we anticipate in a very future culture without the tension of nation-states fighting or contesting each other. So this is the peaceful Fox-McDonald's scenario. So it was the part of an article that was talking about globalization ultimately, and talking about these as being what globalization could lead to, where brands take over our belief system and become the sacred things in society to a consumer group. So that was story number 2 for a different sort of purpose that set up this article. The third one is about Las Vegas, and this was an article that I wrote, May the Force Be With You, Las Vegas, as Consumer Infantilization. And this one was for the year 2000. Introduction, The Last Resort, Dateline, Las Vegas. And so this is like a newspaper article. Megacorp recently announced plans for a new, entirely below-ground hotel, casino, theme park here to be called Hell. Having already themed Pharaonic Egypt, the Roman Empire, Caribbean pirates, South Sea volcanic isles, the Land of Oz, New York City, Paris, Venice, Monte Carlo, medieval castles, and other exotic locales and eras, it was perhaps only a matter of time before one of the corporations in Las Vegas tumbled to hell. The resort ties in nicely with the city's annual Hell Dorado celebration, is such a thing, as well as its association with the mortal sins of greed, lust, drunkenness, debauchery, and bad taste. With the catchy ad slogans Megacorp is trumpeting, go to hell, you'll be dying to get here, the devil made me do it, and damn good fun. Hell seems destined to become the latest and greatest attraction in this city of excess. With hell's promised spectacles, ever-flaming fire and brimstone, the mirage of periodically erupting volcano is likely to seem tame. Planned theme rides like the Drop of Doom, From Here to Eternity, the Bottomless Pit, promise much more profound and frightening adventures than the roller coasters and log fumes of other strip resorts. What's a wild wave pool when you can swim in boiling oil? What's a barge on the Nile when you can be ferried across the river Styx by Sharon? And what's gambling for money when you can play You Bet Your Life? If the secrets of the Luxor appeal to those fascinated with New Age occultism, imagine the satanic possibilities and titillating torture in hell. Demonish and devilishly costumed employees will fittingly be called the croupiers from hell, the cocktail waitresses from hell, and the pit bosses from hell. The new resort's president is to be addressed as His Royal Satanic Majesty, and to attract aging baby boomers, Megacorp has already signed Mick Jagger to play the Big Doom, giving sympathy for the devil, along with warm-up act Kiss, Hotter Than Hell, and Meatloaf, Bad Out of Hell, while a succession of heavy metal bands will appear as lounge acts. It comes as little surprise that the resort's restaurants will feature flame-broiled dinners, deviled eggs, soul food, and devil's food cake to guests seated in handbaskets. Shops in the resort's shopping arcade include Needful Things, Souls on Fire discotheque, Hellmark cards, My Soul shoes, Save My Soul shoes, Rosemary's Baby Shop, Devil May Care clothing, Hellraiser's bar, Beetlejuice Julius, Club Limbo Death Watch, theater featuring Corpses on Parade musical review, Hell's Angels insignia wear, the Faustus Follies, Hard Rock and Hot Plays, and Beelzebub's Brew Pub. In the future, Las Vegas's rumored underworld connections will likely have entirely new meanings. Well, I read this to a doctoral student and a faculty member, and their reaction was, when is it going to open? This was intended to be farcical, but all the other things in Las Vegas are already pretty far-fetched, and this was just taking them one step further. But they actually believe that there could be such a place or such a resort in Las Vegas. So this was the setup for an article analyzing Las Vegas and people who go there as being infantilized by these Disneyland, so it's Disneyland for adults, basically. And that makes them better gamblers because they're playful, they lose their inhibitions, and they take a chance, even though it may be on the poker machine. So that was the third one, and just one more. This was done, it was published in 1987. So this was done before the internet was really possible. We had Web 1.0 where you could put up static pages. We didn't have the interactive web, it was 2.0, or the Web 3.0 that we're presumably headed towards with the metaverse. And so it was called A Modest Proposal for Creating Verisimilitude. I got to find in consumer information processing models and some suggestions for establishing a discipline to study consumer behavior. Consumer information processing was the dominant model at the time. Consumers were seen as computers that we fed information to it, and out came an answer. So sort of a positivist view of what consumers were like, rational human beings processing information, making good choices. And of course, qualitative research has disrupted that. And so, in this case, this half of the chapter's title, first half of this chapter's title, Modest Proposal, is borrowed from Jonathan Swift's ingenious solution to the Irish poor's burden of too many children during the Great Potato Famine. After fattening the children for a year, sell them to the rich as a source of fine food and leather. This solves both the overpopulation and low standard of living problem characteristic of the poor, while also adding some joy to the lives of the rich via new forms of haute cuisine and couture. The problem to be addressed by the current proposal is itself more modest. The dominant paradigm in consumer research, the view of consumers as information processors, is not an adequate representation of the way consumers behave. While this paradigm is an elegant synthesis of the economics rational man and cognitive psychology's metaphorical model of man as a computer, it just has not proven to be very useful in illuminating the rich mysteries of consumer behavior. The literature need not be reviewed here to convince the reader that consumers seek little or no information and ignore nearly all information that they accidentally encounter, seldom if ever engage in problem-solving behavior, and in general process information far less well than the most modest grade school computer. The solution proposed for the inadequacies of consumer information processing, CIP model, is as expedient as Jonathan Swift's, even though it must take advantage of technological possibilities that could never have been envisioned in Swift's time. The technology derives partly from the same phenomena that provides the metaphor for the consumer in the CIP view, the computer. Currently, this technology flourishes in the region of California known as Silicon Valley. Here, the Apple, the Osborne, and a host of other computers and computer technologies have been born. The other part of the necessary technology currently flourishes in the region of northern Utah known as Bionic Valley. Here, a blend of engineering and medicine has produced artificial hearts, kidneys, hands, arms, ears, and other parts of the human anatomy. True. From here, the solution to the problem of consumer behavior departures from the CIP model should be obvious. If consumers are too normally stupid to behave in the way the computer does, let us provide them with the artificial intelligence that will enable them to do so. I am informed by scientists in both Silicon Valley and Bionic Valley that this is not only technologically possible, but long overdue. With the surgical implant of one small processor chip and another for added speed, another processor chip for added speed and numerical calculation, consumers should be able to not only live up to the models that have been developed to describe their behavior, but they should behave in a much more predictable, logical, and infallible fashion than is currently the case. No more self-indulgent splurges, overly generous gifts of love, non-nutritional eating, ignored advertising, or lamentable susceptibility to well-crafted personal sales appeal. These benefits are so self-evidently in the consumer's best interest that consumers will hardly need to be convinced to acquire the requisite package of artificial intelligence. The U.S. economy and society will benefit from the perfect price competition and elimination of wasteful appeals. Given the savings that accrue to consumers and society, it seems quite certain that medical insurance and perhaps even the federal government will cover all of the costs involved. Non-CIP behavior, after all, can be regarded as a form of mental illness. Furthermore, the incorporation of a small portable transceiver during chip chip implantation, marketers should be able to continuously monitor the information consumers process and accurately anticipate their next purchase before they are made. I'm told that the range will be greatly enhanced with a small 6-inch antenna that could be installed on the top of the cranium, coupled with cellular mobile technology. The evaluation of specific marketing programs will then become instantaneous and definitive. This should allow both marketing and consumer research to come out of the dark ages of crafts practice and become true science at last. But rather than stop with just monitoring consumers via this consumer marketer link, it can also be used to transmit advertising directly to the consumer for processing without the necessity of wasting time with mass media to receive the information. The information can even be sent and processed as consumers sleep. The savings and advertising costs will benefit all of society, while consumers will be freed of endless hours of tedious and unproductive television viewing. The possibilities for test marketing are fully as enticing. Split cable and UPC scanning systems will quickly be outmoded as consumer test and marketing strategy duels are waged instantly and painlessly through the wonders of electronics. With dual implant split cable testing will be further antiquated by the possibilities of split brain testing. Having provided consumers with standardized processing units and assuring that all those in the designated target market will receive and process the intended advertising data, one further step remains to optimize consumer behavior. With the input of correct weights, values, importances, and evaluations into consumers' multi-attitude models, consumers can all arrive at indisputably correct preferences. Of course, this means that we will all drive mid-sized brown sedans. But even if the lunatic fringe insists upon a variety of consumer choices, we can always give different objective functions. I won't go on and finish this.
But life is becoming complex.
Yes, so life is becoming complex. This is actually a guy in Sweden called Neil Harbison, and I don't think we have time. We're about out of time. I think it's just a 2-minute clip. Maybe I can find it. This will sort of explain what he's doing. Oops. Maybe we could just get this clip. It comes up.
New York City. And this is Neil Harbison. He has never seen colour. Born with a condition called achromatopsia, he only sees a world of black and white.
I was always curious about color because everyone is using it in daily life. They're mentioning it every single day. So I was interested in sensing color. Not because I wanted to change my sight, but because I wanted to have this element of color in my life.
With the help of a team of engineers and doctors, he created something straight out of science fiction. Neil had an electronic device implanted inside his skull.
So this is a color sensor, picks up light frequencies. It sends the light frequency to a chip, and then the chip transforms the light frequency into a real vibration that moves inside the skull. So the vibration in my skull becomes a sound in my inner ear, and each color has a different vibration, so it creates a different note. So now the antenna is picking up the light frequencies of this color. People can see the light frequencies and they say it's blue. I can say it's blue because the light frequencies are being converted into a vibration in my skull. In the same way that people can see this frequency, I can sense it through vibrations in my head. So for example, red is very low, it's an F, and then blue sounds C sharp, and the green sounds A. So when I look at this wall, I hear lots of music. So it's a musical wall, and there's lots of sound coming out of these colors. The next stage that was a big stage was when I started to dream in color. So when I sleep, my brain creates the sound of color, so I dream in color, and that was also a very big emotional step.
Something absolutely amazing going on here. You see, the pathways in Neil's brain have adapted to these new sensory inputs. And over time, it's got to the extent that he doesn't need to even hear a particular sound to relate it to a specific colour. It's happening automatically. To the extent that when he goes to sleep and the machine is turned off, his brain can still produce those sounds so that he can dream in colour. What about that? The technology has fused to the circuitry in his brain, effectively making Neil a cyborg. A cyborg.
That's the end of that. The thing that came up is actually, there's actually a study that I'm doing that's an experiment. It's about violence by men against women, but it's actually a 2x2. It's actually a 2x2 experiment because we're showing it to men and we're showing it to women, and so that's another variable. So the woman is either a robot or a human, and the man is either a robot or a human. And so we're looking at the different combinations. The dependent measure here is a story. So we tell consumers, this is a graphic novel. We've got this this one picture. We only show them one of these. And tell us what a story might be around that picture. And so now we're analyzing that data. So this is really a qualitative study, but it's set up in an experimental format because we want to know how these stories relate to gender violence and also how they relate to human-robot relationships. So I think we've sort of exhausted the time, and I'm sorry for talking so much and reading the stories, but maybe you get the idea of how we might use stories or how basically any study needs to convey itself in a story-like way with beginning, middle, and end. Again, not necessarily in that order, but usually journals like it in that order, with literature review at the beginning and so forth. Questions, comments before we go today? Please.
So sometimes when we write a research article, it follows a pattern. It starts with introduction, literature review, methodology, findings and conclusions. But when we focus particularly on qualitative research article, like suppose we want to do a case study or something, it doesn't typically follows the structure of an article. So sometimes it becomes very challenging to get it published because it is not following a regular norm of writing a research article. So how should we use this qualitative methodology and the structure of how the structure of the paper should be when we are doing the
There's one journal that I would recommend having a look at. It's called the Journal of Customer Behavior, not consumer, but customer. And it is very accepting of a wide variety of things, including poetry and art and stories. And if you have a non-typical format for your paper, I think they would be very receptive to it. I think any of these story formats, and there are other things, of course, that were part of these, would be well received by that journal. There's a guy at Going Through Management that I met giving some remote talks, and then I spent 2 weeks in Ringo last May. And he submitted something, and on a phenomenon called Abductive sexualis. It's people who fall in love with bridges and the Eiffel Tower and such things. And as you can imagine, normal journals were sort of hands-off with that. But this journal was very receptive. He also did a poem that he sent in and got it published in the journal. And some other people in GIAN are also headed toward that journal with the things they're producing. At any rate, that's one solution. Go to this journal, which is very receptive to non-standard things. The other harder path is to try to convince the journal and the reviewers that what you're doing is valid. And you may find, surprisingly, that the reviewers say, that's great, I like this is refreshing, I really got engaged with this. And if so, whatever journal you're headed toward, hopefully it's like that. Certain journals like Consumption Markets and Culture are pretty open-minded, receptive toward that sort of thing. Sometimes Journal of Marketing Management will entertain such things. Sometimes Marketing Theory will entertain such things. I'm not trying to dissuade you from the really top journals, Journal of Consumer Research, Journal of Marketing, Journal of Marketing Research, Journal of Consumer Psychology, maybe Journal of the Academy, Journal of the Academy of Marketing Management. But those other journals may have a built-in proclivity toward warmly embracing you with that non-standard research format. So go for it, that's great.
Because I published an article in Journal of Retailing and Consumer Services, which is more accepting towards quantitative research. But mine was very qualitative work. So the one comment before accepting the paper was it is very qualitative in nature, and could you please justify why it should be published in a journal which usually accepts quantitative research.
Oh.
So I have to give a lot of justification for why it is suitable for that journal.
But apparently you were successful.
Yes,
You got it accepted. That's wonderful. Congratulations. So there's another journal that, while it's quantitative primarily, is potentially